War can sneak up on states like a thief in the night. Russia is at its highest combat readiness since the collapse of the Soviet Union. According to Ukrainian intelligence, 127,000 Russian troops have gathered near Ukraine's borders. A portion of the mobilization is part of a joint exercise with Belarus, but the facts on the ground give the Russian leadership the option of attacking Ukraine from the east, south, and north. Russia's military advantage is overwhelming. It could assault Ukraine at very short notice. However, a Russian assault on Ukraine with the mission to capture the capital Kiev would ignite a conflict on a scale not seen since Iraq in 2003. So how would a Russian attack on Ukraine go down? And what would constitute Russia's ultimate objective? I'm your host Shirvan, and welcome to Caspian Report. Today's episode is sponsored by CuriosityStream, a streaming service that offers thousands of documentaries from some of the world's best filmmakers. It's the Hulu for history buffs or the Netflix for nerds. CuriosityStream works on most platforms, it's available worldwide, and they frequently add new content. For additional insight into the Ukraine-Russia stalemate, have a look at State of Play in the Story of Europe series and The Last Days of the USSR. These two documentaries provide additional context as to the motives for Russia's westward push. Using our link below, you will get unlimited access for only $2.99 a month or just $19.99 for the whole year. That is a terrific deal and a good way to support Caspian Report because it lets us make more content. Now, if you want to test things out, you can. There is a 30-day free trial available. Just go to curiositystream.com/Caspian and use the promo code Caspian during the sign-up process. The well-being of a nation, its peace and prosperity, is unattainable unless and until its security is firmly established. In Russia, security overrules all other socio-economic considerations. At times, those security interests even intrude into the political affairs of its neighbors. The Kremlin has a particular allergy to democracy. That's just how it's wired. Whether it's in Belarus, Kazakhstan, or Ukraine, Russia cannot tolerate a democratically governed neighbor. A democracy at its doorstep would inevitably look to the West to develop its legitimacy and liberal values, aligning with institutions like the EU and NATO in the process. Of course, this is how the Russians see it. Whether true or false doesn't matter. The Kremlin shapes its foreign policy according to that paradigm.
Знаете, я уже давно никак не рассматриваю его заявление, по-моему, он уже потерял связь с реальностью.
In Ukraine, the 2014 revolution brought forth democratic rule in Kiev. Fast forward a few years, and Ukraine is now in its final phase of a geopolitical realignment by looking to join the EU and NATO. Yet what makes Ukraine a special case is its geography. The flat terrain of Ukraine merges seamlessly with Russian territory. No geographic features mark the international boundaries. Should Ukraine join NATO, Russia would have to increase military spending and expand the size of its army to secure its western flank. So at best, NATO expansion into Ukraine would bankrupt Russia, both militarily and economically. At worst, NATO presence in Ukraine would threaten Russia's territorial integrity. Ukraine's Black Sea coast is only about 750 kilometers to the Caspian Sea. A professional military could move across that distance in a day or two. Doing so would result in a land bridge that cuts the Russian heartland from the North Caucasus, paralyzing the Russian state. The final element that gives urgency to the Ukrainian crisis is timing. Kiev is buying strategic arms left and right. Firstly, it has a growing stockpile of anti-tank missiles, supplied mainly by the United States and the United Kingdom. Secondly, Ukraine has also established licensed facilities to produce Turkish combat drones, which have proved deadly effective against Russian weaponry. And thirdly, Ukraine is looking to develop a missile program of its own, one that can threaten the Russian heartland in the same way Russia threatens the Ukrainian heartland. In time, whether it's 5 years or 10 years, the proliferation of strategic weapons will make invading Ukraine exceedingly costly. The country will gradually be better equipped to defend itself and harbor weapons to strike into Russian territory. The longer Russia waits, the longer it puts off an invasion, the stronger Ukraine gets and the costlier Russia's battle plans become. So, as grim as it sounds, it's better to act quickly than to hesitate until the time of action is past. How the Russian leadership will proceed is anyone's guess. The threat, however, is real, in both political and geographic terms, as well as in timing.
Значит, если на территории Украины возникнут комплексы какие-то ударные, подлетное время до Москвы будет, значит, там 7-10, а в случае размещения гиперзвукового оружия 5 минут.
Should the Kremlin decide to take its chances and attack Ukraine, there are a few strategies to go for. The most credible battle plan comes from the alleged CIA interception of Russian military communications in early 2021. While the contents of the interception remain classified, NATO officials talking to the German newspaper Bild summed up the Russian plan as follows. Should war commence, the Russian army could strike from Donbass in the east, Belarus in the north, and Crimea in the south. The assault would come in 3 distinct phases, thereby allowing breathing room for diplomatic concessions. After taking a specific region, and if negotiations fail, the Russian army could move on to the next target, and so on, until Kiev rebukes and Moscow's political objective is met. Either way, the first phase is likely to focus on southern Ukraine. Russian tanks and troops coming from Crimea would take the coastline and surround the city of Odessa. Meanwhile, a Russian amphibious landing operation would cut Ukraine off from the Black Sea while strengthening the supply lines going into Crimea. Interestingly, 6 Russian amphibious ships departed the Baltic Sea in mid-January, heading towards the Atlantic Ocean. It is believed their destination is the Black Sea, which makes an amphibious assault all the more feasible. Eventually, though, the Russians would want to join their forces north of Odessa and then advance as far as Transnistria, a Russian-backed separatist region legally part of Moldova. At the same time, still in Phase 1, Russian special forces would infiltrate the southern portion of the Dnieper River. Their mission would be to disrupt Ukrainian logistics going across the river. Russia's vast artillery forces in Crimea would coordinate their attacks with the special forces on the ground, thereby tying up Ukrainian forces. Likewise, from the east in Donbass, Russian troops backed by the Air Force would take a chunk of eastern Ukraine and then take the cities of Dnipro and Zaporozhye by the Dnieper River. From there, the Russians would be free to advance towards Crimea and form a continuous land bridge going from Donbass to Transnistria. As soon as southern Ukraine comes under Russian control, the Kremlin would start dictating terms for a political surrender. If that doesn't work, it's on to Phase 2. Coming from the northeast, Russian mechanized infantry would surround Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv. Backed by the Air Force, the Russian army would advance on Poltava and anchor by the Dnieper. Kharkiv and Poltava would be encircled, gas, electricity, and food supplies would be cut off. A few weeks into the siege, the cities would likely capitulate. In the second phase, Russia would have taken much of Ukrainian territories east of the Dnieper. The second round of negotiations would start, and if these fail as well, Russia would launch Phase 3 of its plan. In this final push, Russian troops would seek to take a chunk of western Ukraine, but crossing the Dnieper might get tricky. The safest way to cross the river is not to cross it, but to move from Belarus into western Ukraine. In December last year, President Lukashenko stated that Belarus would do everything to bring Ukraine back into the fold. That means Belarus would serve as a launching platform, not that it would have much of a choice. Either way, from Belarus, Russian troops would move into the west of Ukraine, but they would have to go around the Chernobyl radiation zone and take the town of Koroshtin first. At the same time, a second Russian contingent would move from Russia into the remainder of northeast Ukraine. Afterwards, in typical pincer movement tactics, the two northern contingents would simultaneously advance on Kiev. The Ukrainian capital would come under siege from the east and west. Now, Kiev is a large metropolitan site, so the Russians would likely wait outside and force the Ukrainian government to capitulate. By the end of Phase 3, roughly 2/3 of Ukraine would come under Russian control. However, no plan survives first contact with the enemy, and Ukraine is no pushover. Going by the official numbers, it has a standing army of 145,000 troops, with an estimated 300,000 veterans on standby. Ukraine has also been stockpiling arms and ammunition for years, even acquiring some high-tech weaponry from abroad. But its arsenal is not yet large enough to change the battlefield. Russia, on the contrary, has very capable artillery, rocket and missile systems. Its air power is substantial, and it has the world's largest fleet of tanks. Russian weapons could devastate Ukrainian military units from afar. In an all-out war, Ukraine would see thousands of casualties within the first hour, and thousands more the days following. So make no mistake about it, the consequences would be terrifying, and the shock would trigger millions to flee west. Yet for Russia, the real challenge would be the resulting insurgency. According to a poll by the Kiev International Institute of Sociology, 1/3 of Ukraine's citizens are willing to take up armed resistance. Those are alarming numbers for the Russians. Based on US military doctrine, to successfully counter an insurgency, the occupation force needs a ratio of 1 counter-insurgent per 20 residents. Adjusted for Ukraine's 44 million citizens, that would mean the Russians would need at least 325,000 boots on the ground to occupy the Ukrainian territory while containing an insurgency. A force that size is not in the works, which implies that Russia wants a quick, decisive victory as opposed to a lengthy occupation. War by itself is a vehicle to reach a political objective. For the Russians, that means compelling Kiev to fulfill Moscow's will. Ideally, this would be the federalization of Ukraine's government. Doing so would preserve the country's territorial integrity while sacrificing its sovereignty. Specifically, by installing a federalized system, each region of Ukraine would be given authority to decide its own culture, economy, and foreign ties with neighboring states. There wouldn't be anything left for the central government to govern over. Moscow would gain the ability to play off the smaller autonomous regions to curtail the political interests of Kiev. It's divide and rule, if you will. A federalized Ukraine would virtually destroy all of Kiev's central power, resulting in the end of a unitary Ukrainian state. And though this political concession may seem better than conflict, in war you can be killed only once, but in politics you can die many times over. I've been your host Shivan from Caspian Report. If you like what we do, leave a comment and hit the like button. It's easy and it's free, but it helps us tremendously with the YouTube algorithm. Thank you for watching, and Saul.